Hi everyone, it's Nigel Giam here, the lead GP training program director of St Mary's Scheme and course director for Mental Med Education and Mental SCA. I'm really happy to have Olga join us today to share her SCA success story, and it's lovely to see Olga smile. I have to say, really good to see you smile and laugh.
Thank you.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
Olga. Very happy for your sitting because this was the third time that you had to go in there.
Yes,
Some people say third
yes.
time lucky, but we say third time with strategy. But before we go into this, maybe you could just introduce yourself to the audience, how you've ended up into general practice. Do tell us a bit about yourself.
Actually, I had an interesting journey. I was qualified as a doctor back to 2000. Oh my God, 25 years. Yeah. Yeah, and I was dedicated to obstetrician and gynae specialty back to my country and spent 9 years doing the specialty and progressing in training quite well. Then, due to family circumstances, I moved over to the UK, yeah, with very little knowledge of English. I didn't speak English at that point, so it
Mhm.
was a proper journey preparing for
Yeah,
IELTS exam,
yeah,
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 PLABs, yeah, and things like that, yeah. And when I started working, I was strongly advised by other people, don't go back to a specialty in this country, try to find something else.
okay,
And I was thinking about GP because obviously I can develop my career, I can use my skills
yeah,
from gynae perspective
yeah.
in GP as well, thinking about HRT, contraceptive, putting implants, coils, and things like that. It's
Yeah.
how I ended up being in GP training program.
Yeah, so that a quarter of a century of being a doctor. Not quite as long as me, but but you're looking good, Olga. That's the main thing to say. Um, I mean, GP in itself, I suppose, is no easy ticket, and I suppose what often candidates find difficult are not just the exams that we're talking about, but I suppose when you fail an exam, because sometimes failure can be something that you've never come across until you've actually done something like this. I mean, in previous interviews, we've talked about people who and trainees who've worked in secondary care specialities and that transition into general practice, and especially this exam which is very different from, a secondary care type exam. Now, you took the exam twice before you came to see me. The first sitting, you were pretty close actually, only about 2.5 marks off. But then the second sitting, actually, it went 11 marks down, didn't it? Um,
Yes, yeah.
and I know we're going to be talking a little bit about this in the context of relating to others specifically for you. But just as a theme, what can sometimes happen is that when candidates fail this exam, they can often actually become even more rigid in how they approach it. Try and do more and more cases rather than look at the behaviors that actually matter to get the marks. And I'd like to share, I suppose, with the audience at this point what you felt you learned after the masterclass, and we had some really fun one-to-one sessions. What you learned in terms of the three domains. So, in terms of data gathering, what would your message be to those who are having to sit for the first time or resit this autumn? What would you be saying to them?
Definitely don't chase symptoms. Just listen because read the instruction carefully. You will have only relevant information in that instruction. Nothing which is not relevant will not be included in that instruction.
Yeah,
And listen carefully what they're telling you. Never pack a queue.
love it.
Sorry, I'm repeating you. Yeah,
No,
never pack
yeah,
a queue.
absolutely.
Yeah, and if you have a chance, just write down a queue. If, for example, you need to address this queue later on in management.
Yes.
So, but just follow the queue and rather than chasing symptoms.
Yeah.
Because if you're following the queue, likely you will get like the primary diagnosis in your head. And in this case, you just can ask few questions around it to make sure that your diagnosis is right
Yes.
and follow it.
Yeah. I think it's so important because actually I was running a master class yesterday and I had three candidates who were attending who are having to resit this autumn. They were all very close like you before, scoring in the early 70s, but they were still stuck in what they think is a structure. Structure being, well, I need to ask my questions around the symptoms. If I follow the cue, that means I lose my structure. But that's a myth, isn't it? Because actually I think
Mm.
structure in a narrative-based exam, as you say, is about following the conversation because the conversation will take you to where you need to be. And yes, of course, you need to have some of those clinical questions, but I think it's always really dangerous in the exam to say, I'll talk about that later. It's such a dangerous thing to do. when you've got to talk about it now. So that's really important. The Q is the king, queen of the consultation. In terms of clinical management, what would your game changers top tips be for our candidates out there?
Clinical management. For example, if someone is coming and worried about something, yeah, always address it in
Yes,
your clinical management. Always, never, yeah, never hide it in your management,
yeah,
even if it's like a different diagnosis. Just explain to them why you don't think
exactly.
it's what they're thinking about.
Yeah,
Yeah, just like, but address it as the first thing in your management plan. When you're going to the management, just address it. Obviously, knowing all NICE guidelines or being very close to NICE guidelines,
mm,
it's very important.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
because you will be scored on that.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I think.
But if you don't address their
Yeah.
concerns, yeah, for example, they're worried about cancer. If you don't address it, yeah, you will lose your marks in interpersonal skills.
Yeah. You'll lose your marks in clinical management also, actually, because
Yeah.
what we're trying to manage is the patient's agenda, and if they've come in with a primary agenda and we haven't actually readdressed it, then we're going to lose marks in relating to others, but also just in the management of the patient and their situation. And I think it is interesting because it's not an AKT, but you're right. There's been changes, for example, big sentinel changes in asthma guidance. And there is an expectation that if you're going to start, for example, some inhalers, that you are now, applying up-to-date medicine in that respect. Um, I suppose the other thing to say is what we don't necessarily want people to do is just think this is a clinical knowledge exam because it isn't. So it is actually all right sometimes to say, you don't actually know what the next step is. You can go and look it up. You can come back to the patient. But what we don't want, I suppose, is you committing to yourself to a management plan which definitely does not follow national guidance. Now, we've talked about relating to others, and I know that in your previous two sittings, this was really the area that unfortunately let you down, which meant that you couldn't get into the pass zone. Um, on this third sitting, your relating to others mark definitely increased massively compared to the last two sittings. What's relating others actually mean to you? How would you explain this to someone who is having to resit, who's kind of thinks to themselves, well, look, I get good patient feedback. Everyone thinks I'm a nice person, but I'm still scoring really poorly on relating to others.
Exactly. It's what happened to me. I had so many nice letters asking like surgery to keep me as to IGP from patients. Yeah, but
Yeah,
unfortunately, scoring low in relating to others, actually, it was putting me down a lot when
yeah,
I was taking my previous attempts. But in data gathering, when you are doing LICEF, yeah, remember what are their main concerns. As I said, you need to address them. I will give you an example from my last sitting exam.
yeah,
Yeah, in the station, it was my very last patient in that set. Yeah, and I just on how it works. Actually, it works amazingly well. Yeah, so it was a patient with diabetes, and because I listened to him. Yeah, and I addressed his cues. I felt management for that case, but I got clear passes in data gathering and interpersonal
there you go.
skills, which
There you
I
go.
which I was like kind of really very surprised because obviously I followed his cue,
Yeah,
I addressed his concerns. Yeah, I didn't follow this part beat. I
yeah,
didn't give him the right medication
yeah, yeah,
because he was
yeah,
already on three. I didn't give them
yeah,
the right one.
yeah,
Yeah, but because I followed his cues and I listened to him, I did listen to his
yeah,
concerns. Yeah, and I didn't offer him management which he didn't want. I believe it helped me to get a
yeah,
clear pass in the personal
yeah.
skills as well.
Yeah. And that's so important, isn't it? Because actually you can still fail a component of the station, whether it's data gathering, clinical management or relating others, but still actually get an overall pass. And it's an aggregate of the marks, which is what matters. And that's a really powerful story because actually the fact that you're relating to others was a clear pass, obviously compensated for the clinical aspect of the clinical management, which is really, really good to hear. Again, just for our audience, LICEF is a new um, acronym that I've invented really just to stay close not just to ideas, concerns, and expectations, but understand the impact the situation is having on the patient's life, how they feel about it. So I suppose in Olga's case about the diabetes, the patient's feeling was that they didn't really want to necessarily start a new medication. It could have impacted their life, so on and so forth. And I guess at that point, it's a negotiation, isn't it? It's then about working through the dilemmas of the case and finding the compromise. So, Olga, I mean, I'm so happy that you've passed and so happy that you're smiling as well. So, one of the things that Olga and I have been working on is this lovely energy that she sort of keeps inside. And I think she and I would agree she can be a bit stubborn at times, but we managed to kind of break through that and get the smiling out. What is the plan now post CCT? I mean, 25 years in the making. The goal is there. You've got it. What's the next chapter?
Next chapter is finding a job.
That's always going to be a
Which
dilemma
is
for everybody right now in general practice. Yes. Okay.
and actually I'm relocating. I'm relocating to a different area. We just got a new house
Oh,
as a family.
oh, wow. Exciting stuff. That's really exciting. Oh, nice, nice,
That's why
nice.
it looks a bit empty at the back. That isn't.
Oh, I thought that was just you being really smart. If you saw my house, you'd see I probably need to relocate as well. It's just too messy. But okay, so that's really exciting. Good stuff happening there. Oh,
Yeah. And obviously, as I said, I want to take the career pathway of a special interest in
yeah,
women health.
yeah,
So it's
absolutely.
what I'm trying to head to it. Yeah.
I'm sure
After
I'm
settling
sure you'll
down.
be amazing at it. All those years of experience never go to waste. Olga, so thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And it was just so fun working with you. Lovely to see you smile. Keep smiling. As they say, three
I will.
smiles a day. That's all the medicine that you need. You smile with your eyes, you smile with your heart.
With your heart.
Yeah, absolutely. Big love to you and your
Yes.
family. You
Thank you
take
very
care.
much.
Okay,
Yes,
take care.
thank you, Nigel.
No
Take care.
problem.
Bye.
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 Bye.